So today we're going to kick off the first part of a two-part series where I'll be taking a look at the stats and the data from all of the VCT games played at Tier 1 this year thus far. And today we're going to take a look at the 2023 comps meta. Tomorrow we'll take a look at agents and how individual agents are doing on certain maps. But the data here includes all of lock-in, all of the 3 VCT leagues, both the league and playoffs, the NA Stage 1 Challenger playoffs, which I included because there wasn't much data at the time and I just kind of wanted to fill it out a bit, and Masters Tokyo. So basically all of Tier 1 games thus far this year, and also some of NA Tier 2. And let's start with our first map, Ascent, and just to very briefly talk about what we're looking at here. The top 3 lists here are the 3 most played comps, and then this fourth one is kind of reserved for a comp that I thought was interesting. Maybe it had a very high win rate, or it's just, you know, a weird comp to talk about. And that's what the comps are down on your left here. Then you've got their pick rates here overall as a percentage of all of the comps played on that map, and then the non-mirror win percentage as well. Now, just to very briefly go through this again. Non-mirror means when one comp, so let's say this top comp here played against this second comp here, that would be a non-mirror game. The comps are slightly different, but that still counts. And so if there's any agents different between the two teams, then that all goes into how often they win for the non-mirror win percentage. So very quickly breaking down Ascent, you can see that the pick rate of the meta comp is astronomical. In fact, no other comp on any other map is above 50% pick rate overall on that map. But on here on Ascent, we are way above 50%, 66%, which means almost 2/3 of every comp played on Ascent is the exact same comp. Not even slight variations, the exact same comp. 66%, absolutely crazy. It just goes to show how kind of solidified the Ascent meta is, which it has been for a very long time now. And you can see, actually, funnily enough, the non-mirror win rate is actually below 50%, but you'll see with a lot of the very heavy meta comps that they tend towards 50%. You know, they're decent comps, of course, you know, that's why they're meta, but, you know, people know how to play against them, people know their weaknesses, all of that kind of stuff, so they generally tend kind of close towards 50% for most of these comps. Now, I've also done this for all of the maps as well, where we've got, again, this Ascent comps meta. Basically, this is me just breaking it down in a pie chart form here, so you can see how much these comps have been played. You know, just kind of a more visual example of it. But then here I've grouped the comps as well. So, for instance, if we go back and, you know, this meta comp and this meta fade comp are basically the same comp, right? Like, Silver for Fade is such a small change. It's basically the same thing, right? They're doing pretty much the exact same thing. And the same could be said for the Killjoy for Cypher. They're going to have slight differences, very, very slight, you know, strengths and weaknesses. But essentially, they are the same comp and trying to do the same idea. So when I've grouped these comps, essentially, this is giving you, like, how often are people playing, like, the main meta idea. Then I've kind of, you know, come up with some kind of, like, splinter ideas. So, for instance, Viper comps, I think, are slightly different, playing the double controller instead, and, you know, potentially not playing a Killjoy as well. They make up about 10% of the meta, and then you've got a tiny slither of Sage comps, and then you've got some other comps as well. But you can just see how dominant the kind of main meta ideas are on Ascent. Okay, moving on to Bind, and you can see we have nothing like the numbers that we saw on Ascent there, where actually Bind is, you know, kind of more spread out in terms of the exact comps that people are playing. You've got Harbor Sage ideas, you've got Fnatic Cypher ideas, you've got Double Dive comps, you've got Gecko comps, you know, all doing different stuff. Obviously, the Double Dive not doing too well thus far, but, you know, different comps are doing okay. Of course, Bind does have a smaller sample size because it wasn't included, you know, towards the early part of the year as it got subbed in for Icebox. And you can see here that, yeah, we've got a much more diverse cast than on Ascent. A lot of different ideas kind of coming in. And when we group those comps together, you can see, again, it's very, very, you know, kind of spread out and diverse. We do have some Double Dive in there, you know, which is quite popular, even though it's not doing too well. You've got Sentinel comps. I included here both Cypher comps and Chamber comps kind of together here. That idea of having the trip on the attack side is kind of what I'm going for there. You got Sage comps, you got Gecko comps, and then, yeah, you've got quite a nice balance here on Bind. On Fracture, again, very, very kind of split. Doesn't seem like any kind of one pervasive idea has, you know, completely dominated the meta. You know, a lot of different teams going in slightly different directions. Double Dive has become actually the most popular comp. You see this a lot in Pacific, you know, things like that, with the Jet and the Raze. And there's also kind of, you know, Raze Neon comps as well that are pretty popular. You got this Breach Fade idea, which is very common as well. This one with the Killjoy, the one where you replace Killjoy with Cypher, also had a decent pick rate. You've got this weird kind of Skyjet one. And of course, the comp I had to include at the bottom was, of course, the EG Sova comp, which you can see is doing very, very well. And when it comes to the grouped comps on Fracture, you can see Double Duelist actually, be that Jet Rays or be that Neon Rays, is actually the most popular of any one group. You do get quite a lot of Fade Breach, also Omen Viper, that kind of old FPX, now Navi kind of style with the Omen Viper, has started to pick up traction with, you know, some other teams as well. But still, other is the most, kind of big category here of the group comps meta. So you can still see it's pretty healthy here on Fracture with no kind of one idea really dominating. Moving on to Haven though, and that isn't quite the case, because you can see again we're up into the 40+% here with the meta comp on Haven. Now, funnily enough, this comp is not doing that well in terms of its non-mirror win rate. To be fair, quite a few of those losses are to just the Astra version of this comp, though I will say anytime I've done these stats and collected these stats, Astra has always destroyed Omen on this map. I don't really know why, but take that for whatever you will. And it seems to be the case now as well today. You also have, you know, the Swamp comp, as I like to call it, the Loud comp. You know, Loud started running on this map. Obviously, Furia ran it back in lock-in as well and continued to do so. NRG picked it up as well. So quite a few Americas teams have been experimenting with this and finding success with it as well, it must be said. And then my comp I wanted to point out was the good old Team Secret, who are just continuing to run the Rays and actually having a bit of success as well. And when we take a look at the grouped comps meta, you can see, you know, when you add in kind of the Astra for the Omens and stuff like that, it becomes 70% of the meta. So you could say that Haven does have a pretty stable meta overall. Other categories that I've included are the Swamp comp, you know, and ideas with the kind of Harbor coming in there, and also some double flash ideas, be that a Sky Breach, be that a Gecko Breach, you know, those kind of ideas where, you know, you are replacing kind of that Sova for maybe a double flash. Those aren't even that far away from the meta, really. So you could even include them in the meta if you wanted to, but I have to put them as their own category, and you can see they make up a decent portion of the meta. Moving on to Lotus, which is a very interesting one. Obviously, this was a new map when these, stats first were being collated, so therefore there isn't really any dominant idea because it was new and everyone was kind of, you know, going off and doing their own stuff. But the meta kind of settled down towards, more recent times to basically the same comp, but with different duelists, right? Like, it's exactly the same comp, but just the 3 different duelists here. You can see that one of these ideas is absolutely destroying the others, right? It seems like if you are going to go for one of these meta ideas, pick the Neon version because it's way better than the others. That seems to be the general idea, you know, teams like Cloud9 running this and whatnot. We've also got the Fnatic comp down here at the bottom, who have obviously destroyed on this map for pretty much the entire time. I will say that other teams, though, you know, like Team Liquid and some other EMEA teams have started to pick up this Raze Fade. Normally they will play Omen instead of Astra, but they have also found quite a bit of success. And so I would almost expect that the meta is going to go in kind of a Raze Fade direction. But if you are going to stick with the Sky, then probably Neon is your best choice. And when we start grouping up those different ideas on Lotus here, again, it's a new map, so there's still a lot of different things, you know, from lock-in and whatever, when teams are running bizarre comps, it must be said. But you've got, you know, the meta comps, about 35%. Then you've got this Raze Fade idea, which has picked up popularity, you know, since Fnatic keep winning on the map, and I expect will be more and more as we go forward. Then I've added this, what I've called Haven comps. Now, Haven comps on Lotus, to me, are comps like single controller, single duelist, breach. Right, breach plus another initiator plus probably a killjoy. That's like a Haven comp, right? So something like Omen, Jet, Sova, breach, killjoy, right? Which you could run on Haven. Those kind of comps have started to die out a bit, but particularly earlier on they were pretty popular. But you can see it's still a pretty balanced meta overall. Moving on to Pearl, and that balanced meta from Lotus is gone because the Swamp comp, as I'm sure many of you would expect, is way up there at 46%. Now, as I said, this is still not above 50%, which might surprise some of you, but then again, you have to remember that, you know, only Loud were running it pretty much, or DRX were as well, I think, at lock-in on this map. So, you know, there wasn't a ton of it towards kind of the start of the year, but obviously it picked up popularity as we've gone forward. And you might be surprised as well that its win rate is quite low. You might wonder, why is that the case? Well, I pretty much know why that's the case, because it was even lower. In fact, it was a lot lower, because after lock-in, a ton of teams picked up this comp on Pearl and tried it. But they didn't know how to play Harbor at all. And they were trolling. They were throwing, because it was so bad that they just always lost. You could have played any comp against some of these teams running this comp because they just clearly had no idea on how to actually play the comp. And so that kind of cost its win rate early, and it's kind of been slowly catching up towards 50% ever since. Now, we've got what I've called RB Silver and RB Fade here. That stands for Red Bull because before Loud started playing this comp, during the off season, this was kind of, during like Red Bull Homegrounds, these were the kind of comps that a lot of teams were playing. You still do get some teams playing them, but, it kind of has died off for the most part. And then at the very bottom here, of course, we have Paper X's Phoenix comp, and they're doing pretty well. And when we group these ideas together, you see that the Swamp comp does get over 50% when you add in some slight variations, like NRG, we're running a Raise version of it, for instance. It does get over 50%. But then we've got what I've called Red Bull Killjoy and Red Bull Viper comps. Now, Red Bull Killjoy means, again, those same comps with like a KO, maybe a Fade or a Sova, but they're running Killjoy. There was also those kind of comps, but they run Viper with no Killjoy. That's what these represent. And then you got Phoenix comps, and then you've got the other as well. So we are entering a kind of, dominant stage here, really, for the Swamp comp here on Pearl. And then finally, we've got Split, and for this one, the Americas comp, as I've called it, because, I think Loud were, the first one to, run this at lock-in and whatnot, and then pretty much every Americas team, bar maybe one or two, started running this comp on Split. And it's probably one of the best performing, like, high pick rate percentage comps here, a 60% non-mirror win rate. So it is doing pretty well. And maybe we'll see even more teams start to lean in towards this comp. Then you've got other, a slight variation on it is the next most picked comp, which is a comp that DRX ran quite a few times here with basically the same thing, but just a KO for a Jet, which did okay as well. Then next you got the Ascent 2021 comp that they won champs with. And teams like Team Vitality play this. Fnatic actually played this comp at lock-in, which is doing fine as well. And then you got Team Liquid's Sky comp, which didn't do well at Masters Tokyo, but they were frying with it in EMEA, where you're running no Raze and a Jet instead, Jet Sky, with a Sage and a Cypher. And so when we take a look at the different group comps and its metas, you can see the Americas comp is, still the kind of dominant force here overall. Then you've got kind of the Sage, Cypher, Double Sentinel ideas that, are still pretty popular, particularly with EMEA. Then you've got the Double Initiator Breach comps. So this would be something like, Raze, Sky Breach, plus maybe Omen Cypher, or plus maybe Astra Viper, right? Like those kind of comps, Fnatic play that kind of comp. That still is kind of a popular idea, maybe a bit more niche, but still there. And then Split has kind of always been a map where a lot of people have had disagreements about which direction to go. And you can still see that, yeah, there's still a lot of other space for different comps. So those are how the maps are playing out in terms of different comps and their pick rates. You might want to use this, for when Premier comes back and whatnot, refer back to this video, what's a popular comp, what's doing well. Maybe we should use that, right? Maybe we could copy this team that's running this comp. And tomorrow I will be doing agents. So we'll be taking a look at, how individual agents are doing on each map, what agents may be overrated on some maps or underrated on some maps, all of that good stuff. So stay tuned for tomorrow's video where we'll take a look at the agents pick rates.